Hi, it's Melanie McLean. This is a session for CSRE. All buyers buy by comparison. They use the principle of substitution. And basically, what does the principle of substitution say? Well, in an appraisal textbook, it would say that a buyer will substitute another item or property of equal utility for the one they're considering. You guys all know exactly how this works. You have a buyer, they contact you. You have a conversation, whether it's by phone, by text, by email. You pin them down on exactly what is it you want, and they give you their laundry list. I need this many bedrooms, this many bathrooms. I'd like to be in this area. I need to be within 20 minutes of my job, which is over here. I want to be in this school district. So once we have all those parameters, we distill down the listings available on the market that suit that buyer. And it's typically not a lot of listings that would suit that buyer, especially in a market that's active and has fairly low supply. So at that point in time, your buyer is going to look at everything that's available. They're going to select a listing, and they're going to base that on all the other things which were available to them. So they're going to say, well, this house has the same room count as that house, but the backyard's nicer. Or this one has a lighter kitchen. Or I like the fact this one's on a cul-de-sac because I have small children. Whatever it is, they're going to make a decision. It is the principle of substitution. Now, when you're an agent, this is why if you are in a homogeneous neighborhood, and note I said neighborhood, not market, homogeneous neighborhood. So homogeneous neighborhood is one where homes are pretty similar in terms of age, square footage, style, and we see these all over the United States in subdivisions which were built by one builder. So let's just say you've got a listing coming up in that subdivision. Let's say it's a pretty good size subdivision, 200 homes. And let's say there's already 10 on the market. If your seller thinks that they can price above all those other 10 on the market, they need to understand the principle of substitution is going to kick in, and those other 10 homes are probably going to sell before theirs does. Now, here's when we have the conversation with the seller that we've all had. But my house is special. And everyone thinks their house is special. One of the biggest things we do for our clients is bring objectivity into the equation. People are by nature subjective. We're subjective about our own houses, our own kids, our own grandkids, our own job, whatever, we're subjective. It's the realtor's job to be objective and say, I understand you've lovingly cared for your home, but guess what? It really isn't bigger, nicer, newer than anything else in this neighborhood. And then the other thing that drives the market is economic conditions. Now, you have a national economy, you have a regional economy, you have a local economy. Some of the things which happen on the national level impact us all. So I sometimes like to kid when I'm teaching a class and I say, I'm a BC realtor. That is before computer. So I was a brand new realtor just getting into the business in the very late 70s, early 80s, when interest rates hit 18 to 20%. That was a national condition that affected every part of the real estate market in the United States, because interest rates dictate how high a payment will be. And at the end of the day, for almost every buyer, unless you're a multimillionaire who doesn't need a mortgage, it comes down to what is it going to cost me per month to buy this house. Now, when we think regional, that can be something. I'm going to use the state of Michigan as an example. Michigan went through a very tough period with the auto industry. And people used Rust Belt to describe that portion of the United States, including Michigan, which was a big manufacturing part of the country, where a lot of companies downsized, moved operations overseas, so forth and so on. So that was a regional thing. Then you have local. So the politician Tip O'Neill always said, all politics is local. Guess what? All real estate is local. It really depends upon where you are. What is the economy like in your part of the United States? Did you have a major industry close up shop? Did you have a new industry come in, bringing lots of new jobs? It will really vary from place to place. So you have to keep your eye on the economic conditions in your area. That doesn't mean ignore federal. You can't ignore the federal. You've got to look at interest rates, the supply of money, whether or not the GSEs are tightening up on requirements for mortgages. But at the end of the day, don't listen to the national news about unemployment. That's got nothing to do with you. Look at the unemployment figures where you are. Now, markets can turn very quickly in either direction. Most changes give us indicators. So one of the benefits of being a BC realtor is I have been through a number of financial crises. I was through the high interest rates of the late 70s, early 80s. I was through the stock market crash in the late 80s. I was through the Great Recession in 2000. And as I'm taping this, we're still dealing with COVID-19 and we don't know where that's going to end. So markets can turn very quickly. Now, sometimes we get a lot of warning signs. So let's go back to those high interest rates. Those high interest rates actually accelerated very quickly. It was Paul Volcker, who was chairman of the Federal Reserve. It was his response to high inflation. And interest rates went up 9% in 8 months, which is a huge amount. What it meant at the time was real estate agents were literally contacting the lender before writing a contract to find out what the rate was. It's not usually that dramatic. In other market slowdowns I've seen, here's what happens. All of a sudden, your list price sales price ratio is spreading out. Remember, list price sales price ratio is a measure of how much of what they thought they were going to get the seller actually got for their property. So if I've got a list price sales price ratio in my market of 95, that means people are getting 95% of what they asked on average. If that starts to spread out and it drops to 92, to 90, to 80, which would be extreme, that market's getting very soft. So that's an indicator. If your inventory goes up, supply and demand is key. Some of the people who are listening to this probably were realtors around 2006 forward, so we had the Great Recession. And what I remember most about that era is the incredible amount of inventory that came to market starting in 2007, and I would say we had high inventory until around 2012, and then it began to return to more normal levels. When we have high inventory, we've got this high supply. We had somewhat diminished demand. Unfortunately, a lot of that supply was people who had owned a home and lost it through foreclosure because of the predatory lending practices. So those people were not able to purchase a house. That left us with everyone else. Now, the buyers did exactly what you would have thought they would do. When they have 100 houses to look at, bless their hearts, they want to look at all 100 houses. And it's going to wear you out. When the market changed, and this is what we had pre-COVID-19, and I'm hoping will continue as the country recovers, we had actually very low supply in a lot of markets, which meant it wasn't, oh, I'm going to look at all 100 houses. It was more like, can you please get me in that house because nothing else has come on the market that suits my needs. So we have to look at those indicators. Now, the next challenge we have with a market turning quickly is sometimes the appraisers have a problem keeping up with that market changing quickly. And this is a challenge because appraisers have to look at sold and closed data. You might be sitting there as a realtor going, I can't believe how nuts this market is. things aren't even lasting a day and they're going under contract and they're going under contract above list price and I'm having multiple offers. I'm going to have a conversation about that in a future course about how you can approach that with an appraiser, but understand a market can move very quickly.